Hi, my name is Benedict. Welcome to Series 2, Episode 2 of the Simple Songwriting series. Now, note that despite the fact that it says simple, none of this is super simple. I get that some people want me to show, here I press this and I put this note here, and we'd be here forever, because songwriting is not really that simple, but there are ways to really simplify the process. Obviously, the more you have a basic understanding of music theory, and that is quite simply knowing, your C major, all the white keys, and knowing how they relate helps you tremendously. Understanding what a chord is helps tremendously. A chord generally is, if we're looking at the white keys, we start at C, we leave a gap of one note, and then it's our second note, another gap of one note, and that's our third note. So 1, 3, 5. Let's use a musical instrument for that. I might need to be this one. That's a chord. And then our octave, which is the same, but we don't need to use the octave, so that's it. And then if we move and then start that at D, so we've got D, F, A, it's become a minor chord, but we don't need to fuss about that, we just call it D. So we've got C and D. Move it up, we've got an E chord. Again, technically it's probably an E minor chord, but who cares? It's just an E chord. Move it up, F, F, A, C. G, G, B, D. That's kind of enough to get you going and deliver quite interesting results. So let's pick up where we were at last time. That sounds quite complex, but it actually isn't. Yes, we have cheated by using the player engines out of these guitar devices. These are free, and they come with a strummer, and I showed you all about how that worked in episode 1. But it's as simple as just knowing how to implement those chords. So we have 4 chords, which is 2 bars, 2 bars, 2 bars, 2 bars. Actually, no, that's 4 bars, sorry. 4 bars on each chord. 4 4s are 16. We've got a 16 bar pattern. It's not technically blues, so we're allowed to have 16 bars. That's it. Now, you might also remember that I mentioned that I'm not a songwriter, so I didn't have any words for this. I was talking to a colleague, Jake, J-Hit Records, who I've been doing quite a bit of work with. I've been helping him mix some of his songs. He's a really impressive songwriter, as you're about to see. And he works with quite a lot of other people, helps them develop their songs, and I've been helping him mix those and give him an understanding of how mixing works, because the more you know about what's going to happen, the easier it is to set that up right in the first place. So I said, look, I was doing this, and he was like, oh yeah, that's really interesting, especially seeing he's a way better songwriter than I am. And I said, I don't have any words or any singer, and being a champion, he just said, I'll do that. And I thought, okay, that's going to put me behind. And lo and behold, 1 or 2 days later, he just gave me this song. Actually, no, he wrote it overnight. Quite literally, he wrote it overnight. What I sent him, before we get to showing you what we got, was I exported the MIDI, and I also exported an MP3 for him just to throw into his DAW and loop. So at least gave him an idea of where I was going, but the MIDI meant that he could clearly see what I was doing, just in case he was as bad at picking up notes as I am, which of course he's not. So we added a piano sound, or a Wurlitzer sound to be more accurate. Just a preset, nothing fancy. But this is quite literally the chords. It was something I was going to walk through in this lesson, which is to say, well, in this case, we hadn't pulled out the chord notes. We'd got the roots of our chord, but we hadn't populated the notes above. This quite literally is populating these notes above. So we see our bass, see how it fits over the top of the bass, and that's it. So we've now got access to all these chord notes. And remember, it's as simple as going one empty spot, next note, one empty spot, next note. That's it. So that's how I've got my C, A, D, and F chords. Seems as a little bit of an unusual chord structure, but it works out fine. So that's what went across to Jake. And he comes over to me because he was visiting me for a mix that we're working on the next day, and he brings me this.
Love is on my mind. It bleeds me from inside, then leaves me out to dry. I think about it still, the passion and the thrill of climbing up that hill to something I can feel, a place to call my own.
Wow, it's there. But wait, boys and girls, there's more. He's written a whole song really in a couple of hours before he went to bed. And I checked, this is new material. He didn't repurpose an old song. He wrote the whole thing and it's all laid out. So we sat the next day and he showed me how it was laid out so that I could lay it out right for you. Because it keeps going. It moves into choruses and next verses.
Take me in your arms.
Now what we're listening to here is completely raw. There's no processing work done at all. There's some rather heavy-handed compression because we can see there are level differences, but I'm not mixing at this point, and I'm deliberately staying out of mixing, even if it creates us some rough edges. Because we are songwriting, we don't want to mix our modes. So we know that the verses are the same. I checked with him. I gave him the opportunity to change chord progressions through choruses and what have you, and he's like, I don't need to do that. It's like, okay, fair enough. So to make it easy, we've got our verse. That's all our musical information. We can just copy that across.
Take me in your arms and lead me with your charm.
Brilliant. Now, the next bit that we will do will be the chorus. The chorus actually just uses the first half of our verse. Isn't that wonderful? Brilliant recycling, Jake. This also proves, what I've been talking about in all the videos so far, is that you do not need a lot of material. That it is quite possible to just copy and paste that verse. Once you've created your verse, it's possible to copy and paste that the whole way through, which is exactly what I'm showing you here. So, verse going into chorus.
Place to call my own. Days I find like the rain.
Cool. So I can now copy that to there and copy that to there. So long as you are tidy and there are no bits hanging off, there's nothing wrong with that. Now there's the intro and interval. He's been very good and left a little bit of space between.
In love.
Well, we're going to put something in there. And he was way ahead of me. So what he's done is these first 1, 2 bars are the first 2 bars here. Now remember, our chord is 4 bars, next chord 4 bars. So it's just the first half of this. So if I grab the first 2 bars of this and drag it here, we're good. But I'm not going to for the moment because it's going to be untidy. See how that's untidy? I do not like untidy, and nor should you. So let's take each of these and make it only 2 bars long. That's it. Brilliant. If your DAW has the ability for you to trim the contents of your clip, which I do, but I just can't seem to find for some reason, then please use it just so that you don't have untidy stuff hanging around later. I'm not going to fuss too much on that at the moment because we're actually going to move to a different project. But I've now got my intro. Now that really is the perfect song intro. 2 bars showing commonly the tonic or the root note of chord of your piece, which is our C, because we're in C major, so that's brilliant. It shows the feel of your piece, it shows the tone and timbre of your piece, provides a nice intro. So that is perfect textbook songwriting. We can then take that same little bit and put it into our interlude, our little bit between. In love, and we've got the same thing here, our interval. In love. And then he goes into repetition of the chorus, but he sings it kind of differently. So we can just grab our chorus data, move it across. Days I find like the rain falling down. I'm always falling down. Simple. When we get to the end, we don't really want to do what's going to happen. In love. Because while his hanging note is great, the music just runs out. Always falling down in love. Now, what's essentially being done here is that he's coming back to our root note. There's a nice cadence in here. In love. Except we don't really want to play all of that. So this is where, remember last time I said it's really all in the detail. It's not in complexity of having complex chords or any of that, or fancy sounds or any of that kind of, well, rot, really. It's in detail. So we know straight away we're not really going to want our drums at this point. Nor are we going to want all of what our bass could do for us. So we can just move all the way through. The piano chords, I think we're going to leave the same. Strumming, yeah, I don't think we want strumming right now. Let's get rid of that. And the same with the electric guitar, but let's just try. Oh, let's be in an edit mode. And let's give him a bar. In love. Okay. In love. See how that gives us a nice clear finish. In love. Now we could mix this up and release it. Put it on our SoundCloud, put it on our YouTube, even better than SoundCloud. Put it on our YouTube with at least a nice picture. of Jake in this instance because he's prettier than I am, and it's him singing. But we're going to do a little bit more than that. But this, see how simple. It looks complex now because there's lots of stuff everywhere, but it's all just this bit here copied out. Literally the same in the verse. For our intro, it's just our first 2 bars. For our chorus, it's our first 2 chords in the pattern, and then repeated twice, and then repeated twice. And then we fall back to what's essentially our intro on the end. Good as that. Obviously, we are truly blessed to have such a charming song and to be sung as nicely as Jake has done it. This is where the real emphasis is at. People think that the real emphasis in the song's all just about good drums and stuff, but even with a really, no mix here, this sounds great.
Take me in your arms and lead me with your charms. You shelter me from harm, but then it goes away, and every word we say turns us into a play, like actors on the stage. Then everything is gone. Days I find like the rain.
Blow me down if he isn't Roy Orbison in hiding. Because we've got a nice lyric and a really nice natural performance, our simple stuff underneath suddenly is made so much better. Now, I could stop there, but that's only 17 minutes, and you'd be sorely disappointed from me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to close it. Because look, boys and girls, here is the project with some more work done. I'll walk you through the things that have been done. Now, I appreciate that some of this may seem complex, but keep going over it. Watch these videos over and over. If you're struggling, if you go, but of course there's stuff you're not going to get. But it's through repetition, and most importantly, by getting in there yourself, opening up your door and putting in a chord pattern like this. You don't have to know whether it's a good chord progression. Forget all this chord pack garbage. You don't want to use other people's chords and progressions, and having a chord progression will not give you a hit. Not at all. It's merely a method, a structure, a backbone. So get your door, open your door, and put some chords in. You don't have to know what they are, just as long as they're there and they circle around and they feel good for you and what you have of your song. And then build from there. Just keep working on it, and you will see me now apply techniques similar to what you saw last time. Because Jake supplied the song, he kind of messed up my whole lesson plan. Damn you, nasty little hobbitses. But he's given us so much more than if I just progressed the way that I was. So we've now got a more detailed song structure. And remember, it's all in the details. So we had something that was really cool with just the basics. Now I'll show you how we've worked through some details to create a better arrangement through just collars and cups. Intro. You should notice a couple of things there. Firstly, drums have disappeared. I'll make sure they're still here. Yep, they're still here. Drums have disappeared. That's good, because we don't need to power in with the drums. We may have gotten the best drum line ever, but we don't need to keep telling people this right from the very beginning. Notice how the lyric builds? We want the song itself to build. We're not showing off drums. We're now showing off this lyric. If we didn't have one, I'd still be telling you you're here to show off the lyric, but you'd be going, I don't get it. But now you can get it, because notice how this works. It prepares us, so when that happens, we're like, oh. So no drums. Everything else is the same, except if you're listening closely, you will hear this. Let's just put this in solo. Three little extra notes. Now, you might be like, well, where'd you get them from? Did you just make them up? Now, I could have. They could be any three random notes, but I went through Jake's performance, and believe me, I am terrible at this. Really terrible at this. But there was a thing that really stood out. Once we got into the chorus, there was this. And then I realised the more I went round and tried to get the notes right, because the MIDI extraction was just horrid. That's the falling down. That's the real hook of the song. I'm always falling down in love. And that's magic. You might think, oh, but that's not very exciting. It's just, why is that remotely interesting? Because this is a hook. That's a really cool hook. So I've taken that, and I debated backwards and forwards over whether to have this be falling down at the beginning, but then it's falling, it's going down. This is actually a cheery song, even though in some ways, if you read just the lyrics, you might think that's not cheery, but it is a very cheery, pretty song. It's lovely. So little detail of taking the falling down and inverted it. So it's the same content, but backwards. And we will recognize that later. I've already told the audience that those three notes are important. They add a little ooh as we're about to hit the vocal, as the lyric's about to start, little rising feeling, and we've already been connected to that progression, which is going to come back later. That's what's been done in the intro. That gets our intro done. Then we go into our verse. You'll notice a little different. Love is on my mind. The difference here is simply that I took out the main drums. Rather than having the main drums, I took them out. I actually started this whole thing with a drum machine. So I think the only way to solo it's to solo here. Very much a little drum machine type thing, almost similar to what you get on the old electronic organs. And it's a set of sounds that I made myself in a refill quite some years ago, and they're triggered from seeing I was using these here, let me play your guitar for you boxes. I thought, look, I'll let this guy play my drums for me as well. So we end up with this rather cool sounding little drum module type thing, you know, that's stuck underneath your electronic organ, and you flicked it on and it said it was a waltz, and you're a bit like, okay, I'll take your word for it. But they were lovely. So that's very soft. I don't mean necessarily in volume, because remember, none of this is mixed at all. It's love.
is on my...
It's controlling our time. It's giving us a nice rhythm, similar in a sense to the rhythm box used, I just realised this now, similar to the rhythm box used in Elton John's Song for Guy. He uses a rhythm box of some kind through that, which provides a really nice time driver without being all...
It bleeds me from inside.
Because this is super sensitive. This is really... It's ace, so we don't want to overdo it with big drums. Not that these drums have ever been big, but we don't want to overdo it.
Then leaves me out to dry. I think about it still.
So we've got... Even though we don't notice either of these as being dominant, we're now putting them together and they provide a really nice, tidy backbone to the other parts which are moving around. And then, of course, for the freeform of Jake with his singing, which moves a lot. He's got a huge vibrato range in here. That is our first verse, then as we move into the chorus, you'll see me introduce the drums.
A place to call my own.
Now, it would have been easy to say, okay, that's the end of the drums before, and I'll just copy it across. This is doable, but not as elegant.
A place to call my own.
Because we're going to hear that quite a bit, I said, look, that's doable, but as I said, not really very elegant. The more you learn and understand, the easier it is to do this. So if you really are kind of like, I don't know what to do, I think I'm going to make a mess, have a go. If it turns out you have made a mess, then just do what I did before. Copy and paste one of the existing things across. There are also intro patterns in the power drum kit thing. Maybe one of them would work, but I like to make these details as much my own as possible, because somebody's intro pattern will have probably been played to sound good on its own, not to reflect your song personally, because they don't know what your song is.
To call my own.
So it's very simple. We've got a tom hit, hi-hat, and a cymbal together. Very simple. Looks simple, sounds simple. You've kind of got to get a feel for your timings to get it right. But spend a little bit of time. The more you do it, the better you get at it.
Call my own.
Remember, we've got the little drum machine underneath it, so we're subtly introducing the drum kit. That's all, subtly.
Call my own. Days I find like the rain.
So by our first chorus, we've now got everything in. All of what we had, the stops are out, they're all playing. So that's allowed us to build up to our chorus. So not only has Jake built up vocally, he's risen and expanded and gotten louder, but we've filled in all the parts of our picture.
And I'm falling down, always falling down in love.
Now, note, we've dropped the main drums. The little drum machine's still rolling, but we've dropped the main drums because we need to let across to people that, oh, this is a little bit of a pause. Now, this is very much going to depend on your song. This was all decided once I had this lyric in. And get your vocal in as quickly as you can, because being able to hear it, even if you're out of tune and out of time and out of everything, being able to hear it will help you make decisions. And I'll step aside as well. This is really, really important, and I could do a whole program on this, and probably should at some stage, learn to listen to what is on tape, not to what's in here. Incredibly easy to be listening to what's in here and thinking, yeah, I've got the coolest heavy metal song ever. Not realizing that I've got a Roy Orbison type song here. This could be sung by Raoul Malo of the Mavericks. It could have been sung by Frankie Valli of the Four Seasons. I mean, with the quality of the song, it could be a Barry Gordy. We've got to know what we've got. And it's not just in genre, but in really hearing what we've got here. And it's so easy to be hearing what you want it to be rather than what it is. Because when your audience come to hear it, they're going to hear what it is. And then you're going to be like, oh. So the more you learn to hear what it is, the more you can work it for what it is. And if I'm thinking this is a heavy metal song, I'm going to be putting in double kick drums and blast beats and all kinds of stuff. And it's going to horribly, horribly mismatch what the song really is. Which is it's not a ballad, it's just a lovely pop song. So make sure, really train yourself from beginning as much as possible, hear what is on tape. As in what's there, not what you want or think you're doing. All right, back to this. So by hearing this, I know that there is this pause in here. In love. Now Jake wants this to hang because we are falling down. In love. Now that has to hang. That has to have moments to kind of seep into us as like he's just given us this thing. I'm always falling down in love. That has to have time to seep into the soul of the listener. That's why he's given us a couple of bars to digest this and give us space for him to start again with his next verse, but to digest this. Now, whilst we're digesting, do we need... No. We need to give people a little bit of gap. So we're pulling away those drums. In love. Now, you probably recognize this already. Oh, look. Falling down, falling down. In love, but falling down in... Because this is leading us to the next chord, which is the C chord. The whole idea of this is not to show off, to say, look how clever I am, I've worked out what that bit is, but to lead. But there's a little bit more done here. This actually has... Oh no, it's not. Sorry, I'm misremembering. I've put that in there, but it doesn't serve the purpose. You can hear this quite clearly within the structure when we listen to this, and it provides a nice counterpoint. Almost Bacharach. That's really important. Remember, details. We could have left that out. We could have just had him fall down in love. In love. And go to the next. And that is okay. But remember, as I said, it's all in the details. When we listen to Michael McDonald with the Doobies, details. He puts lots of detail in. So take the time to put in a little bit of detail. It's not as hard as you think. Just have a go. Go, does this sound feel good? If not, then have another go. But keep going. The more you do it, the easier it will get. And of course, the more you understand your note structure and what notes work nicely and what don't. We want to avoid that, generally speaking. I mean, there's nothing wrong with using seconds. If you're playing an organ, there's not even necessarily anything wrong with using what's called a hammer chord. But if you don't know what they are and why you'd want them, then just don't do them. Use your nice, safe 1, 3, 5. So 3, 2, 1, leading 6, which is leading to 5. Takes a little bit of practice, but just keep going with it. Now, the other thing you'd start to notice here is that we've got strings coming in. Now, I could I'll drag that out of the way. Yes, we've got strings as we come into the next verse. Probably 2 loud strings at the moment, but remember, mixing's not a thing. By putting a leading note, not quite a grace note, but just a pre-roll note, we ease our way into that string. It doesn't come as such a surprise.
Shelter me from harm, but then it goes away.
Look at what we've got. Guess what? Hopefully you would have realized this by now already. This is actually our tonic of our chords. So it's the root note of our chords. C, A, D. Now this one's a little bit trickier. It could be F, but I've taken another note. That's an A. We have gotten an A in the middle of our chord. So it's still a chord note. It's just...
You shelter me from harm.
I didn't want this to rise at this point. We could, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Shelter me from harm, but then it goes away.
And there's absolutely no reason that we couldn't. I just wanted this to still seem to rise again. So, personal choice.
You shelter me from harm, but then it goes away. Every word we say turns us into a play, like actors on a stage.
So we've introduced what sounds reasonably sophisticated. You've got to get the right sound, and that's not perfect, but it's good enough. You've got to pick your range as well. We want to... We don't really want this to be double basses. There's no reason why we wouldn't, but we're looking for incredibly simple orchestration. Now, orchestration doesn't mean adding an orchestra. Orchestration really just means adding more stuff around it, and it can be absolutely anything. It can be electric guitars, it can be people playing triangles, people bashing the heads of butterflies in so that they scream to fill out the sound of what you do. That's all orchestration. So I've started with, in sort of the high cello, low viola kind of range, because we know we're going to get that really nice hearty sound. Then I move as we move into the chorus. That's just our second verse, and it's got nothing complex at all. If we wanted to, we could add passing notes, but I wanted to show you that you just don't really need to. Here we look a little bit more complex, but we'll listen to the bottom of the line first. I can't separate it. We can pop it in solo. So in terms of what those notes are, the low notes, well look, they're almost exactly our root notes. That one's just changed because we've got a little bit more complexity in here. So sometimes you go, okay, I need to move one of those notes a little bit. It's a C, it's actually an E. So if it were in the piano line, the E is here, which happens to be the top note that he's starting from, and also happens to be the seventh note. So if we were to say that's a seventh chord, that's a chord, that's a seventh chord. So we're creating a seventh chord, only we're putting it down there. It's an inversion of a seventh chord. It's a little bit more complex with our lead line. Now, as much as possible, it took me quite a few goes round, and it's possible there are still notes that are missing a little bit. I've copied his vocal line.
Like the rain.
So I'm always falling down in love. You can hear it, you can pick it out. Even though this top line is the same, pretty well the same, yeah, it's exactly the same, it sounds different because our bottom line, which is the lower notes here, is not the same. So if we were to play that note and that note, okay, fine. But if we play notice how the top note is sort of the same, but overall the sound changes. That's harmony. So we're using harmony here, very simple harmony, to have repetition that sounds different. So we're playing down here, our string line is playing down here, the low end of the cello, and sort of middle to high end of a double bass. But the second time round, we clearly moved to the high end of the cello, but we've also brought in violas at least, if not violins. Whereas this is always violins. So it gives a different feel the second time round.
Always falling down in love.
So our second chorus, which is double, sounds bigger than our first one. Our first one was the biggest thing in the song so far. The second time it's round, it is bigger and then slightly bigger again. Even though we haven't introduced more instruments, we've just allowed the bass part to come up so that it's becoming more noticeable. We then go into an interval. It's a double interval. We had just 2 bars here, 2 bars here. Now we've got 2 bars, 2 bars. Because we've gotten a bit big,
falling down in love.
we do need to give a sense of rest after that. If it was a rock song, we might power from here into Slash and Eddie Van Halen beating each other to death with fretboard tapping. But this is not that song.
In love.
Now you can pretty well tell what I was going to do. I've dropped, in this case, because I really want that sense of gap, of breath, of space to be more evident. I've dropped all the drums. Bass, pianos, guitars are all doing the same thing. They never actually stop doing anything in this. They probably should, but they never do. Strings are the most obvious thing. The first thing that happens here, and let's just have our strings in solo. Now this is again built around the vocal.
In love.
That note happens to be the 5th. So it's a good safe note to use regardless. And it's an in-between note, so it carries a certain kind of tension.
In love.
And we're going back to using the chorus. Again, even though he sings it differently, he sings it like a verse, but it's actually the chorus again. So I've got a bridge between these two parts. So I take taking a breath.
In love.
And then I start to work my way down. Look at this. Do you recognize that? Falling down, falling down. So it's the same figure, just altered. And then we need to prepare ourselves for the fact that we're going to do this again. But we want it to feel a little different. So we've used our G, which is in the middle again, and our G, which is in the middle again down here. So we've gone, because we're going out there. So it's just allowed us to travel.
Love.
So it makes that smooth rather than just being here. There's this block. We'll drop that in there. We want to make it smooth. Remember again, it's the detail. Michael McDonald with the Doobies would have done a nicer job than I've done, but I'm just showing you how much you can achieve with very little. It's just the thinking to know that you need to do this. Same with the piano. At this point, I've added just a little figure. You recognize this figure, but the notes are different. So it's played. So if we get there, which still gives us witches. So as the string's doing its thing, this is doing a little thing as well, and it carries over into the first part of the next chord, which is the C chord, now with one of those on top, which is just your middle E. So with them all playing together. If we didn't have that little ping at the end, it feels unfinished. Let's just drag him off. You barely notice it, but it makes it nicer when it is there. Gives you a sense of ownership. Now remember also that our singer isn't coming in at that point. See, he's always late. Which is a Dwight Yoakam song, which he actually stole from a 60s act. So that's given us little unique moments in this otherwise quite rigid structure. Through the end of this, largely the same, except for the string. It keeps the same thing. I've moved this note up this time rather than keeping it down.
Falling down. Oh, mine, falling down. Always falling down.
Between the strings and the piano, we do get a little complex. Now, don't expect, if this is the first 1 or 10 songs that you've done, don't expect necessarily to get this done, or even anywhere near as right as I might have done it, and I don't pretend to have done it right. So with this end, it's clearly big.
Oh, mine, falling down.
So I've taken what he's singing, backing it with the strings, but his ending is a little different. He goes high. Now the string doesn't have to be there, it could actually be on the normal note, which is what we'll call low, which you'll see I've done with the piano. One version falling down in lab, which I can't get. And the top version goes down. So we end up with a... what have we got? We've got a C and a... which is a fourth. So... actually no, it's a fifth apart. But it's the fourth above. Only inverted. So we're just taking our string, which will pop in solo. Same. We've just gone up. We're matching where our singer's going. And that is at the end. We make sure that we follow our cadence. That's the root note of our piece, the C. That's the leading note. Now remember from last time, perfect cadence. So we're using the string to do that part of it. The piano is going both ways at once, like I said. It gets a little complex, but it's allowed to do that. You can simplify that. It goes to the same Let me choose my piano sound. I said choose my piano sound. Sometimes it just doesn't like to flip across. We're still doing that here. We're not really using both parts of it, we're just using that. We're not actually playing the F. Yes, we are. We're playing the F in the chord. So it's there. The F is here. So rather than playing them around our target notes, we've got there, and then this plays our chord there. So it plays. No, where is it? So there are various ways to do it. It softens the cadence a little bit, but we've got enough strength in that cadence from Jake that we can add that little bit of extra detail to give us and the way that we do that is personal. If we put 1 million songwriters in the room, then yes, we would end up with a few other people doing that, but we'd find a lot of them did something different. So it's the choices that we make.
Falling down in love.
See, remember, if we just let that finish without any of this stuff, the song just kind of runs out. And I really don't like it. Like, I'll get sent songs to mix and they just run out. As in, like, oh yeah, I ran out of energy, I just stopped. Please don't do that. Put something in there that says this is a considered ending. Because the ending is super important on your song. It's like a movie. What do you want when you walk out of the cinema? You want that, oh, I'm coming back to the real world. That was a magical experience. And where does the magical experience come from? The title credits? The logo of the production company? No, it comes from the last couple of minutes of the film where, well, preferably you end up with a happy ending. You know, the bad guy gets his head chopped off. The good guy gets to kiss the girl with the huge... the world is all good and right, and you're like, wow, I feel wonderful. I can go outside and slay giants, and you get outside and the sun's bright and you feel wonderful. Because you feel wonderful, you're now open to going to the movies again. Maybe even seeing that very same movie again, buying it on DVD, watching it on Netflix, buying the t-shirt. This is important. In music, you are a businessman as well, always. And forget Spotify and all that kind of stuff. Just think in terms of what will make people want to do this again.
Falling down in love.
All of what's come before now needs to be beautifully finished so that people go, isn't that lovely, and want to do it again. And there are probably plenty of ladies, and maybe a few men out there as well, who are thinking, I want to have his babies. Not mine, but that guy who's singing, Jake, who's singing, because he's done a great job. He's written a good song, but he's delivered it beautifully. And as we see, such an impressive song is built from nothing more than this. Which, while pleasing, is kind of nothing special until we add a good lyric and a really lovely performance. So again, focus on the bit that matters, which is this bit here. You know, that where you've got your your lyric and a great delivery and a really powerful delivery. I've just finished mixing a track from a fellow. I won't say who it is, what it is. And in terms of being a singer, he's in tune sometimes. I have not used auto-tuning on him at all because it actually destroys his performance. Not because it makes him sound like T-Pain, that was a whole other kind of destruction, but because the way that he manages his tune has a huge impact on the way we feel about the story that he's telling. And so tuning a character singer is an unwise thing to do in that situation. Almost everyone else would go, oh, but we've got to make this perfect. It's like perfect's going to ruin the art. So forget the idea of perfect. Let's work with the magic. And the magic in that particular singer is not his ability to be in tune, but his ability to have written and delivered a great story in a really powerful way, a way that puts him up there with late Bowie, puts him up with against Tom Waits or something like that. He doesn't sound remotely like Waits, but that world that he's built. So again, what's underneath it with him is pretty simple, but it's the delivery that counts. So focus on the delivery, and then this bit, it can be surprisingly simple. Also, if you're really getting to that point where you go, look, this isn't what I'm good at, doing the putting it into music bit, then talk to people like myself and Jake, because this is what we specialize in doing, in helping people get their story told. That's really all the writing on this. As I said, I had a lesson plan, was going to do some other stuff, but having the opportunity to have this vocal come in is so worth the changes. If you're still with me at this point, yes, please, hit rewind, go over it again, but more importantly, get out your door and practice putting in those notes. Practice with things that you've seen. Do the best you can, and then do it again. And do the best you can, and do it again. And every time between the best you can and do it again, you must publish. If you don't publish, then you've never really done the work, and it doesn't settle in. I know it's very easy to think, oh, but this isn't perfect, I won't publish it. Go back to any artist and their really early work before they got famous. Bowie, look for David Jones records. You'll kind of regret that you did. He wasn't very good. The Beatles, BBC recordings, which is them doing covers of American songs. They're not bad, but they're not great. They're not equal to the material that they are playing at that point. Even though their star is clearly on the rise. It wasn't till later that they really, but it was through doing it over and over. And the Beatles were always open that the fact that it wasn't the cavern that made them, it was Berlin that made them, having to play over and over, night after night, to earn their feed, turn them into a band who were worth anything. And then, of course, as they worked harder and harder and released record after record and tried new things. But none of that would have happened if they'd just gone straight into trying new things. Pink Floyd, their earliest records, honestly, I don't think are very good. But they hit their straps, especially when they hit Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here. That's when Floyd really is like, there's no other band like this. Bruce Springsteen, if you get a compilation called Chapter and Verse, there are a couple of pre-E Street Band songs, and you're a bit kind of like, yeah, you wouldn't bother with that guy. But the fact that he published and did the work and kept adding, because you can't add if you haven't published, he kept adding, and he became more and more interesting. And then there's clearly that point on Chapter and Verse where you hit one of the songs, and it's like, that's Springsteen there. And of course he grows and becomes more and more of his Brucefulness. So, go through this, pull out what you can, do it. Finish that project, publish it. It must be published, then do it again. Come back and watch the video over. Maybe I'll have another one. Ask me questions. If you don't want to do the work, that is okay. Sometimes it's best not to do that work yourself. Sometimes it's far more efficient to give it to somebody else. If you are a great singer and a great songwriter, then you don't have to fuss with being able to play much of anything. As long as you can hand off your chords and ideally your vocal melody, because as we see, extraction is a tortured process that fails more than it succeeds, then get someone to do it, because there are people out there who are great at putting together songs, helping the story get told, but they're never going to have a career as the face. Just as Jim Steinman records really didn't sell super well compared to Meatloaf. So, of course, any questions, ask down below. The next episode of this, we will be mixing and mastering this. I won't walk you through the whole mix process, but show you, okay, this is where we get to. This is going to be the final release. So you can see how we can start with kind of nothing and turn out with a very releasable product. You have a good day.